now is BDS CEO and cybersecurity expert Scott Schober. Thanks for being here, Scott.
Thanks for having me on there, Tommy. Appreciate it.
So, Scott, as a cybersecurity expert, fill us in. Is cyber espionage the new weapon against our national security?
Yeah, absolutely, especially as of late with all these breaches. We heard about them over time, over the past decade, here and there, but never really got the full picture. Now it's really intensifying, and the attacks are certainly a lot more focused. And as you mentioned there, the U.S. is spending a lot of money focusing in on a U.S. cybersecurity command center based out of Fort Meade, Maryland. And what that's really doing is it's allowing them to share best practices between the different agencies so they can combat this growing threat, especially that's coming in from Russia and a lot of other areas.
I want to talk first about the White House computer breaches we've heard about in recent weeks. How concerning is this? How close do you think they got? Obviously, they're not commenting too much, but are there that many holes in this system that hackers could actually get in and compromise the White House of all places?
Yeah, it is very concerning because when you think about it, here you've got the most powerful individual in the world, the President of the United States, the executive office. If they can get pretty close to hacking into it to the point where they had to take the network down, the virtual private network they took down for a period of time, they were that close to really infiltrating it. So they found a vulnerability, they exploited it, so there should be great concern. It should never get to that level with all the safeguards that they do have in place there. So it concerns myself as really the general public as well, because that means, are we targets too? Well, certainly. We don't have that type of protection in place as the President of the United States in the executive office. Concerning.
And not only that, but they have all of our information, as we know,
Yep.
So we need to be concerned about that as well, that they could use that against us. And I keep talking about they. I know they won't say who did it, but they say that the Russians are actually the likely suspects. What do you think about that?
I think it's a good possibility there. A lot of things are leading toward that. There were some documents, obviously, that the media reported on that got out that from an email from the inside of the White House claiming that it's probably Russian hackers or Russian-sponsored. Another strong possibility, there's a growing group called the Sandworm, and that's a Russian nation-sponsored cybersecurity hacker group that basically would be funded from the Russian government, and it would really kind of go up against all the conflict that's going on with Ukraine and things against the United States. So that's a likelihood as well. I'm sure with time we'll find a little bit more, but we'll never fully understand the big picture here.
And they've done this before. In 2008, wasn't there another breach that was tied to the Russians? So to me, we should be looking towards this, and they might be our biggest state-sponsored cybersecurity threat. I want to ask you next about China, because we've heard about them too. What about the Chinese? Are they after us as well as far as the internet goes and cybersecurity?
Yeah, excellent point there, Tommy. I look at China a little bit differently. My opinion on this is they're going after a different target. In this case, with China, it's IP, intellectual property. They're still stealing billions of dollars of U.S. intellectual property from different corporations and really infiltrating and just taking this information and using it to advantage it. And again, it's probably government-sponsored, and a lot of the corporations in these cyber hack groups throughout China are using the U.S. for this intellectual property. Huge concern. It affects the economy globally and especially right here in the United States.
Next thing I want to move to, and the last thing I want to move to, is medical devices. Now, as I mentioned previously, it sounds like an episode of Homeland. We know Dick Cheney has had some issues in the past where he's shut off some of his medical devices for fear of national security. But is this what's next? We're going to have remote control of our medical devices?
Yeah, absolutely. I view it a little bit differently. It's not as likely that a hacker is going to go in and start messing with an artificial heart or defibrillator, different things like that. What they could do is cause more havoc in that they could easily jam those frequencies, because the frequencies that medical-grade equipment is working on are licensed frequencies. That means that our cell phones and Wi-Fi and other things are not transmitting and receiving there. So it's very hard to hack into those. It can be done, but much harder. More likely somebody could use a wideband jammer and cause interference. So if your heart is told to give a jolt or something like that, the artificial heart, keep going, that communication could be interrupted, and that could cause havoc. It could cause somebody to die. So very serious. That makes you think, who is actually watching over this or monitoring the safety of this? They need to have some protocol to make sure that these medical devices are safe.
That's
and
the
that
next
they
thing I
are
want to
secure.
ask you, Scott. Who does need to be held accountable? Is it the people that are making the devices? Is it the government? Is it the hospitals themselves? Who do we turn to for protection of everyday Americans with these devices?
Yeah, nice point. Really, it's everybody's responsibility. You hate to have another level of government oversight on anything, but certainly the FDA and other organizations could have oversight here and should, and actually force the manufacturers to make sure they test these medical devices 100%. What they need to do is take an ethical hacker, just called a white hat hacker, to actually try to penetrate and find the vulnerabilities so they don't get hacked, these medical devices.
And so we can be one step ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Proactive. That's what they need to do.
And I hope certainly that we do, because like you said, there's a lot at stake. It can impact the economy, national security, everyday Americans, medically as well. So cybersecurity is something we need to keep hitting home. And thank you, Scott, for being here and doing just